This meeting is called to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. This meeting was included in a list of meeting dates sent to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on January 3rd, 2019, and was posted on the bulletin board of Borough Hall, 221 South Fifth Avenue on January 3rd, 2019, and has remained continuously posted as required by law. Fire exits are to my left and to my right. And if you come up to speak, please speak into the microphones. And assistive listening devices are available if anyone needs them. Diane Ray, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Brill-Mittler.
Here.
Councilman Fine.
Here.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin.
Here.
Councilman George.
Here.
Councilman Hale.
Here.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan.
Here.
Councilwoman Welkowitz. Borough Attorney.
Here.
Borough Administrator.
Here.
All right, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular and conference meetings held October 23rd, 2018, November 7th, 2018, December 4th, 2018, December 18th, 2018, and the adjourn and organization meetings held January 2nd, 2019, as distributed.
Also move.
Second.
Do roll call, because I know some people may abstain.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine.
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin.
Yes.
Councilman George.
I think I abstain as to November 7. I believe I was late at that meeting. Yes as to the rest.
Councilman Hale.
I was not at December 18th, so I need to abstain from that one, but the others I'm okay with.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan.
Abstain from November 7th through December 18th.
Okay. That's why I said that.
Okay. Council reports. I'm going to start on my left with Councilwoman Elsie Foster Dublin.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick update tonight that tomorrow we're going to start the process of interviewing for a police chief and captain. And we're going to be hosting those interviews, and we would like to have persons in place by next month, so the interview process will start. And that we did hire a new officer that started with us last month. He's an experienced officer from Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Hospital. And he's quite familiar with trauma cases and persons with emotionally disturbed persons and that kind of thing. He works well in the hospital with that, so he came on board. And the next interview that we're going to be hosting will be for the public safety director, and that will be on Friday. We'll keep everyone posted as we move forward in all of this. And hopefully we'll have the Lacey report at the end of the month. Thank you.
If I could just make one adjustment to your report, Elsie, we're interviewing for a mentor, not a public safety director.
I'm sorry, my bad. Yeah, the mentor for, and the person that will be in charge of our fire first aid Office of Emergency Management.
No, that's a different position.
That's on Friday. We'll be interviewing for that.
No.
No. That's a different position, Elsie. I know there's been a lot going on.
Changing stuff. Okay, so go back to the old report now. We are going to be interviewing tomorrow for the chief/captain for our police department. On Friday, we're going to be interviewing the mentors.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do not have a report this evening, Madam Mayor. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Kim Chohan, do you have a report?
No, I don't have a report, but I just want to remind everyone over at REC, because now is the time for summer camp. We did do early start this year for summer camp. You can drop off your children at 7 a.m. It's early at 7 a.m. this year. And that's it. Happy Women's History Month.
Thank you. Councilman Hale.
I do have a brief report. I wanted to start by saying and wishing a very happy birthday to our own state senator, Patrick Deigan. whose birthday is today. He's a tireless campaign and champion for Highland Park, Middlesex County, and all of New Jersey. So I think that's the air conditioning. I hope it's not me. Anyway, so I wanted to wish him a happy birthday. I also wanted to mention that on Monday, March 25th at 7 p.m., the Human Relations Commission is going to host an event at the Zone 16 Center, 600 Benner Street in Highland Park. The name of the event is The Conversation, Advanced Care Planning and the Secret to Successful Aging, with Dr. Shira Goldberg. Dr. Goldberg is a Highland Park resident. She currently serves as the medical director for hospice and palliative care at the Monmouth Medical Center in Long Branch. She's board certified in both internal and geriatric medicine, and this is a wonderful workshop on a very, very important topic. So again, that's Monday, March 25th, 7 p.m. I will not be able to make that because that's my wedding anniversary. So happy anniversary, Carrie. So thank you.
Council President, do you have a report?
I do, Mayor. Thank you. First, with regard to Public Works, I met with DPW this morning. We were working on the calculations. We have a rough out of some of the areas that we're going to be using the new one-man collection truck, as well as doing some calculations on some of the older route. And as a result, we've roughly calculated the number of toters, the big cans that the machine will automatically lift and have that order together. So hopefully they'll arrive in a month. So it looks like we're moving forward very rapidly on getting that moving. DPW also met with our arborist contractor to establish a schedule for tree maintenance in the spring. The arbor is working around some slow time in their other contract work, so they're going to be performing tree removal for a full week. This is going to be removal of dangerous material. I've talked to a number of people. A lot of the trees suffered some damage. They were aging out or are past maturity. So we'll be removing dangerous branches, also trying to open up some of the street lights as well before they start to leaf out. This may leave some of just the trunk standing for later removal, but we want to get the safety maintenance done right away. There have been a number of cars that have been hit with falling branches, especially with the freeze and warm. They're not working on the ash trees for the emerald ash borer problem, though. DPW has surveyed the bulk of the remaining ash trees, and we believe we may be able to remove them ourselves without having to contract with the arborist. In the Environmental Commission at the meeting recently, we discussed the borough's emerging electric vehicle program. They made some good suggestions about some amendments to the zoning ordinance and did recommend, as I've been urging, that we add at least one electric vehicle to our fleet to replace our old gas-powered vehicles around town. I visited the Meadows Trail early this morning and spoke to a volunteer who was already out on the Meadows Trail surveying. We're going to start working. There's a lot of cleanup of fallen branches and so on. It's going to start. Good news for everybody, the PSE solar field, DPW has started to do cleanup to get that site ready for PSE&G. They are doing some of the lighter work. We don't really have the larger equipment that the contractor will be building in, but for the site where the solar panels are going to be actually erected, DPW has started that removal work. In Sustainable Highland Park, this kind of rolls in with Ms. Kim Chohan's arts program. As you know, the Sustainable Highland Park got a grant for poster design for Earth Day. The deadline is coming up, so if you have an artist, a would-be artist, or anybody who wants to draw a poster, the information is available on our website as well as Sustainable Highland Park and the Arts Commission. And finally, but not least, STAC has been working regularly with DPW on maintaining the green canopy and the emerald ash borer problem, as well as tree replacement. These programs are working very well now as they liaison under the new chair, Karen Swain, and the very active members who realize that working with us and DPW has really begun to be a great partnership. And I thank them all for that cooperation. And a note for the record, in my meeting with DPW this morning, they are very thankful to the point where they're actually now supplying information, and on all our tree removals, they're going to be giving them monthly updates so that staff can immediately update the replanting list as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes,
I have one more thing.
go ahead.
Just want to share with everyone that we have a longstanding member of our community center, Calvin Malden. He passed last Thursday, and on Thursday will be his wake in New Brunswick. Calvin has served as our Santa Claus over at the Senior Center for the Christmas dinner for many years, and he was just an all-around volunteer given his time and his service. And would just like to have a moment of silence in remembrance of Calvin.
Would everyone take a moment, please?
Thank you.
Okay, continuing with the reports, Borough Administrator, do you have a report?
Yes, I do, Mayor. I have a few things I want to make sure are on people's radar. I'm also filling in for Councilwoman Welkowitz on a couple items. So starting with that one, she wanted to make sure everybody was aware of the fact that our placemaking project is underway. She's mentioned we've been partnering with Rutgers students from the Blaustein Planning School, graduate students, to do some lighter, quicker, cheaper initiatives in the downtown area, partnering with Main Street Highland Park. They surveyed the area, and where they landed was to try to activate the downtown living rooms. So you'll see starting in, let me see the dates here, the 30th and the 31st, the students may be out there doing some installation, trying to put some activities and other amenities at those locations to try to encourage people to use them and take advantage of them and engage downtown, and you'll be hearing more about that. But if you see some kids out there working, please feel free to ask them what they're doing and maybe even pitch in and help them, because they're going to be DIYing the whole project. So you'll see them out there starting in the end of March and doing some installation on the weekends for the next couple of weeks following that. So that's been coming along nicely. I wanted to make sure everybody was aware that we received a grant from the DEP to provide radon testing kits. That they'll be available, they're starting now, downstairs in the code office. They're free of charge. You just have to give us your name and your address and your contact information, because we might ping you to make sure you actually installed them. But they're free of charge, and they'll let you know if you have a radon issue you may need to look into. And they'll have more information on that downstairs.
If I could just add, we do encourage everyone to participate in that program.
Yes, if you have not, I had to do that when I bought my house, so if you have not already had your home tested, it's worth doing, because there are levels in Highland Park. Just a reminder, I wasn't sure if Councilman George would hit it, but we are ramping up toward our plastic bag, or our bring your own bag ordinance, effective May 1st. Plastic bags will be assessed a fee for 6 months, after which there will be not allowed to be distributed in establishments, retail establishments of 1,000 feet or greater. We have just today walked Main Street, had a bunch of staff out there to try to talk to the vendors first to make sure they understand. Is that you have the letter,
The kit.
Mayor?
Yeah.
Sorry, Mayor, I may have usurped one of your items.
Perfectly
Sorry.
fine.
And we will be putting information on our website, and you'll be seeing more and more, working with Sustainable Highland Park, distributing bags to those who need them, and we have much more planned. So I just wanted to make sure the hard work of getting the ordinance passed, and now the even harder work of actually implementing it, will be beginning effective May 1st. We're in that ramp-up period now. Sorry, we got a couple more, and I promise to get through this. Just a heads up, we heard from PSE&G. For those of you who live on roads where the gas line work was done last year and the roads are still torn up, they will be coming in to do the resurfacing. The milling will happen next week, and the paving, if weather permits, will be the week of April 1st. You will get more information if this affects you directly. They will be dropping off material at your house. You will be getting reverse dialed the day before, and there'll be no parking signs and all that stuff. But I just wanted to, I've been getting that question a lot, when are we going to get to those roads? And I'm pleased to hear that due to some scheduling shifts, they're able to accommodate us earlier in the schedule than we had initially thought. So that's coming, and if it affects you directly, you will hear more about it. The drone survey that we've talked about with regard to trying to assess our deer issue in town. We've ordered it. We're partnering with the county on that, and they will be doing the flyover if the weather permits on April 3rd. They'll be looking at the southerly kind of wooded areas of town along the river and up into the Rutgers Ecological Preserve in Piscataway, because that's where a lot of our deer, we're trying to count how many deer we have. And that's what we'll be doing, and that's going to inform that community meeting that we've been talking about when we want to present what we think the options are. So if you see this little thing in the sky on April 3rd, that's what that is. We will also do a nixle, but I just thought, you know, people, you know, that can be kind of an odd thing. I just wanted to make sure you knew it was happening, and if you saw it, you know what it was. And the last of two things left. Focus group meeting. We're excited. We're rolling out a new website this year, and one of the things we're going to do is kind of do some focus groups with some of our users. And these are people that probably just regular old users of our website. And we have our first of two focus groups on March 28th, one at 7 o'clock, one at 8 o'clock. There's going to be some hands-on exercises because we really want to try to make sure this website is usable and is friendly and gets you what you need. So there's information on how to sign up on the website and on Facebook. I just wanted to put that on your radar. And the last thing I want to report, because I'm just so pleased, if all goes well, we might have a working microphone for the public this evening. So bear with us if there's some feedback, but we're really trying to make it work. But appreciate your bearing with us while we work that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Borough Attorney, do you have a report?
Madam Mayor, yes, I do have a report. And the report concerns Buck Woods. We have been litigating with the owner of Buck Woods, Jack Morris, since 2009. We've gone through the list of cases that go back to 2009 where we were preventing the removal of trees and the development of the property in a way we thought was inappropriate. There's a lawsuit we started back in 2015, which we had to start in order to have an affordable housing program that was recognized by the state, but also gave us builders immunity from lawsuits by people like Jack Morris and other developers. There are two other lawsuits, 2017 and 2018, where efforts were made and were successful in blocking the removal of the trees on the property. There was a stay issued in a lawsuit which we participated in. And finally, there's a new 2018 lawsuit where Mr. Morris and his company are suing the borough, alleging that the borough is responsible for any pollution and cleanup on Buck Woods, a property, of course, we have never, ever owned. Our last event in any of these cases took place this past Friday in Middlesex County before Judge McCluskey, who is the judge who's in charge of our Mount Laurel case. And I look in the audience, there were several residents who attended that hearing Friday morning. The purpose of that hearing was to urge the judge to continue the stay or prevent the removal of trees on Buck Woods while we worked on an ordinance which would allow for 75 units to be developed on Buck Woods as required by our Mount Laurel Affordable Housing Plan. And we had asked him to keep the stay in place, notwithstanding the fact that the case that had the stay was dismissed by him 2 weeks earlier on March the 1st. And the judge found at that time that the case should be dismissed and that the matter could go forward in terms of removal of the trees on Buck Woods for environmental testing and then eventual development. The judge on Friday took the decision under advisement, which meant that he did not give us a decision on our request to extend the stay. We were optimistic because the last time we were before the judge, we were given until May 30th in order to develop the ordinance that I mentioned for 75 units of housing on the property. And he had hinted that he would continue that until May 30th until we got the ordinance done. We got a decision yesterday afternoon in my office at about 4:30, 4:45, where the judge lifted the stay on the removal of the trees on Buck Woods. He did so because, number one, the case that held that stay had been dismissed by him 2 weeks earlier. And number two, he found that the LSRP, or the engineer that's licensed to oversee cleanups, was the responsible LSRP on the property. No one else, not our engineer, not the residents' engineer, but their engineer, and that he was responsible for the cleanup, and if he directed that the trees come down with a permit, the trees had to come down. We were informed, as that decision was coming through the machine, that obviously the JSM people, Morris people, were informed of that, and they dispatched, I believe, some workers with chainsaws and probably with bulldozers, knowing the way they operate, and they began to take down the trees, which are under the second permit, which, by the way, we were required to issue by Judge Natale back with a court order in 2017. We didn't want to issue that permit. The judge signed a court order directing us to issue the permit, which we did. So the trees, I understand, as of last night, 6 or 7 o'clock before they broke, a number of those trees were already taken down. I would expect they were back this morning. Our code enforcement officer was down there early this morning with someone from Public Works to confirm that the trees, which were supposed to be taken down under the permit, were the only trees taken down, and that they were tagged properly, and that the snow fencing was up, all required by the second permit, which we were required by Judge Natale to issue. And we believe they did it by the book. They knew enough to follow the permit, and they took down those trees. So I guess the long battle, going back to 2009, to protect the trees on Buck Woods has now been lost, and those trees are down. The next step for us is to create the ordinance, which we've been told we have until the 30th of May to do, but we intend to do it sooner, which would limit the development on the property to a certain percentage of coverage and a certain percentage of floor area ratio, or how many floors there would be. We are advocating for, and we will do an ordinance which will concentrate the development in 2 buildings closest to 6th Avenue. That's where the property comes in, and that's where the improvements should take place. We are trying to make sure that the coverage on the remainder of the property in the rear, hopefully 40 or 50% of that, does not have to be disturbed. Now, the caveat to that is that if the LSRP for Mr. Morris files for a 3rd permit, we'd have to fight that out with them to say that if the rear part of the property is going to remain untouched, except for having been touched today and yesterday, then we don't need to issue another permit. And we're prepared to make that argument. But our task now is to come up with an ordinance which preserves as much of that property as possible, concentrates the development where we think it should be concentrated, away from the southern or the rear part of the property with the most significant steep slopes, and comes up with a development plan that's consistent with other multifamily plans around town. And that's our focus right now, is to come up with that ordinance. So that's my report, a long-winded report, but it is really 10 years worth of litigation involving the tree removal. And that litigation now continues with the cleanup case that they filed against us, complying with our affordable housing obligation. And we'll fight those cases. We'll continue. If there are additional cases, we'll fight those as well. But the order was, I have a couple of copies of the order there if you care to read it. The judge did put an opinion with that explaining why he lifted the stay. He didn't think any benefit would be achieved. Eventually the trees would have to come down. Why? Because their LSRP, their engineer in charge of cleaning up the property, is the one that makes the call, according to the judge, under the environmental laws. And that's why he gave great reference to that LSRP and followed what that LSRP recommended and required. And that's why the trees came down. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's an excellent segue into my report, which has to do with Buck Woods as well. I just want to go on the record here. While we have great respect for the rule of law, the Borough of Highland Park is deeply upset at the ruling of a Middlesex County judge on Monday, March 18th, which allowed the developer to cut down dozens of trees on the Buck Woods property. and we are frustrated that the developer, ignoring long-standing and widespread public opinion, promptly went ahead and took down a wide swath of tree cover. The borough continues to share the concerns of all of our neighbors, and we too question the long-term aesthetic and environmental impact of the developer's plans. The borough has been battling to preserve Buck Woods, as you heard, to the fullest extent allowed by law for over a decade, and has spent thousands of dollars in legal fees and staff time to do so. With so many interlocking issues involved, of zoning, planning, environmental impact, property owner rights, neighborhood concerns, cohort situations, and finances, we also know quite well how complicated the matter truly is. We'll continue to work closely with the neighbors of Buck Woods to do all we can to lawfully limit and mitigate the impact of the developer's actions on Buck Woods property. And I hope you'll continue to work with us. All right, that gives us our first public discussion session. I just want to remind everyone it's a total of 15 minutes, and each person who comes up to speak during this session has 3 minutes. And Terry's going to go get her phone to time this.
Of course, the second session is...
Yes, and thank you, Josh. The second session is longer, and you can speak more than 3 minutes. I just want to wait for she's timing. Okay. You ready, Terry?
You name and address, or just name?
Mm-hmm. Name and address.
Yeah. So I'm Justin Burton, 40 Cedar Ave. I'm currently serving as the chair of the Highland Park Equity Commission, and this is just a short status update on the commission's work related to the hiring of the acting police chief. As Councilperson Foster Dublin mentioned just a few minutes ago, the interviews will start for that tomorrow. So the Equity Commission has a lot of things that we're working on over the next year. This was kind of the first thing that we started working with the council on, so it seems like an appropriate time to kind of sum up what we did. So the Equity Commission hosted a forum on February 6th where attendees from the community asked clarifying questions of council representatives, then broke into small groups to generate themes and questions related to equity that they wanted represented in the interviews with police chief candidates. Since February, the Equity Commission has been working to distill the information from the forum into questions and rubrics that can advise the Public Safety Committee in its evaluation of the candidates. These questions and rubrics have been handed off to Commission Liaison Councilperson Matthew Hale as of minutes ago. And the same questions and rubrics will be circulated among the attendees of the February forum and available to anyone else who wants to see them. Our understanding is that the Public Safety Committee will complete the rubrics, including running commentary on the candidates' answers, and share these completed rubrics with the Equity Commission. The Equity Commission will then use that information to provide equity-related feedback to the Public Safety Committee. The Equity Commission will be more directly involved in the selection of the acting police chief's mentor. One or more representatives of the commission will participate in the interview of the mentor candidates with the goal of ensuring that the acting police chief is mentored by someone with a commitment to equitable policing policy and practice. The Equity Commission remains disappointed that the hiring of an acting police chief has not been a more transparent process. Other boroughs and townships in New Jersey have held public interview sessions when hiring a chief, and such a session would have been beneficial for all involved if we had hosted one in Highland Park. Involving the Equity Commission, whose sole purpose of existence is to advise on matters of equity, more directly in the process, either by having representatives of the Commission present in the interview room or privy to transcripts of the interviews, also would have helped provide extra layers of careful thought and consideration to equity concerns. So we've asked the borough to consider these matters, and we received 2 basic answers. What we're asking was either 1, not legal because it risked unveiling personnel matters that the borough must keep confidential, or 2, not possible because it would count as a change in the process that would default on the borough's collectively bargained agreement with the PBA to maintain a consistent hiring practice from beginning to end of a job search. We understand these concerns, and we urge the borough to be more open to future hiring processes that find more meaningful ways to involve the community, especially when the hire will be someone empowered to set the tone for how force is used on whomever is in the limits of our borough. As is, the Equity Commission, which the Borough Council established to advise on matters of equity, is far enough removed from the interview process of the acting police chief that we're not certain that we'll receive enough information to offer substantive advice we're committed to doing our best, and we ask the council to consider better, more transparent, more equitable processes in the future.
Thank you very much, Justin. And by the way, you nailed the 3 minutes, I'm told.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Herb Gross, and I live at Adelaide Gardens. Word has been officially received from the Veterans Administration to our post commander, William Young, in Highland Park, and it has been forwarded to me. I want every veteran's family, the mothers and fathers of our brave men and women who are fighting today to preserve your freedom, to protect your freedom, and shortly these men and women will be coming home. The word that I mentioned a second ago, this is the 75th year of the GI Bill, and I am proud to report to the veterans and their families and everyone in this room, the GI Bill now has been amended. If a veteran comes home and for some personal reason he doesn't want to use the GI Bill, he can pass this on to his wife. And if his wife is a veteran, maybe she doesn't want to use the GI Bill. She can pass it on now to her children. And to every family, the many men and women in this community who are senior citizens, and by the way, they are veterans, many men and women who I know personally. These are veterans who fought for this country. They're your neighbors. They're your relatives. They can pass this GI Bill on to their family members. This is the 75th year. And if any veteran's family wants to contact me, I'd be more than glad to introduce them to our post commander, and he can give you much more information. But I will be glad to help you. Last month, I mentioned that there now are some 14 United States congressmen that are veterans on both sides of the aisle. And what I would like to do this evening, with permission, I would like to pass this on to the members of the council, and maybe they would like to read this.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. Marcia?
Hi, I'm Marcia Goldberg, 451 South Fifth Avenue. I'm here to speak about Buckwoods. I have a lot to say, as you can imagine. You can't hear anything? Can you hear me now? Okay. I would like to just, at this point, and I'll be back in the next session, address a few of the statements that the borough's attorney made. And with all due respect, I think if you were going to speak about this issue, you should have updated yourself a little bit better. You say that they were probably there with bulldozers. Well, at 5 o'clock, they were there with bulldozers, and they stayed until 7 with bulldozers, and they were back at 8 o'clock this morning, and they've been there all day with bulldozers. And to talk about preserving the southern end of the woods is actually a moot point because it is destroyed completely. And you should all please, some of you have been to my house at 451 South Fifth. I invite everyone on the council to come over and stand in back of my house and see what is back there now. Now, there's a lot to talk about, but what I'd like to talk about right now is I'd like to ask you all a question. What are you going to do to protect our property? A number of us are here. It's not just my house. It's an entire block. We all live very close to that property line. There are big trees currently right at the edge of my property, and they are probably going to topple over soon. There's also a steep slope, and there's almost certainly going to be damage to the house over the years, if not immediately. So is the borough going to do something about this, and I'll just add, do I have time for one more statement? One more sentence or two? When I asked this exact question in May of 2018, when this all came up, I asked the borough's engineer this question, and he said, well, I suggest you take before and after pictures when they cut the trees, because they were about to do that in May 2018. Take some before and after pictures so you can document the destruction. And I said, really? And then what? And then he said, maybe you could sue the developer. So that's the advice I've been getting. That's where we're at now, and it's over now. So there's nothing to preserve. This is exactly what he was planning to do: make a big hole, a big ugly hole that we will beg him to fill up and build on. So what's your response? Thank you.
So Marcia, just what I can tell you is I don't know exactly what the engineer said to you at that time. I don't recall it. Okay, well, I don't recall what he said to you. I will tell you that we are very concerned about the property and what's going on. So we're not dropping this, is what I can tell you. I'm sorry, Marcia, I know. It's your home, I get it. I know.
Hi, Melanie McDermott from South 3rd Avenue, 330 South 3rd Avenue. And I'm also here to speak about Buck Woods. This is only the latest in a series of losses that our community has suffered, that our watershed has suffered. And I want to thank the borough for what it's tried to do, and especially Marcia and her husband for the resistance that we have put up. And as everyone pointed out, and the most important thing is that it's not over yet, not far. So this JSM does not have an approved site plan. There's a lot of steps to go, and I just want to first of all say that we should not concede anything, that we don't absolutely have to every step of the way. There's got to be a 25-foot stream buffer. There's got to be our impervious cover retention. And this is what I want to most particularly speak about, the tree protection, which is nearly moot, and the tree replacement, according to our tree ordinance. I would like to see here report back that someone from code enforcement has gone back to the site tomorrow and verified what Marcia has said. From the pictures she showed, and I personally can't bear to go there, there really isn't much left. We have an approved tree permit with 179 trees slated for removal. It does not seem possible that those trees that were meant to be retained haven't retained. A. B, if they've been so destabilized by the excavation. I mean, who removes trees with a bulldozer? They didn't even have the dignity to use chainsaws and protect the site. If those trees go down in the future, he's liable for those as well. I would like to hear a report back from our enforcement that we are out there documenting, not just the neighbors.
So I can tell you, Melanie, that our code enforcement team was sent out there this morning, and I think they went back out this afternoon, Borough Administrator.
They need to go back because
my point is they're going to be going out and checking.
All right, because it as I said, it doesn't seem possible that they retained the trees that they promised to do. So we need that documented. I also, from my reading of the ordinance, don't understand how, I know we had to, we're told, make the issuance on court order. But our ordinance says that all tree replacement requirements and/or fees shall be approved. So whether the developer is going to replace or pay and/or paid prior to the issuance of the permit. That didn't happen. And we were contesting the permit, and so how JSM was able to go forward as soon as the stay was lifted without taking care of that, I don't know.
So let me just ask the attorney something. Did he pay for the removal of the trees up front? I thought there was a...
Well, he posted a bond for the replacement of the trees.
Of the 179.
For the 179, and he when he goes through the development process, he won't have the choice of putting back on the property or off the property. Our planning board can direct that they go back on the property. So he has satisfied that requirement.
Okay, so there's two things. There's a bond that the trees get replaced and that they survive once they are replaced, and then there's the replacement fee.
Yep, Melanie, can you come back at the second round?
All right. Okay, I will do that. Are my 3 minutes up?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyway, the story is not over, and
Right.
we have to fight to protect our watershed and our neighbors.
Agreed.
2 minutes left in the public session.
Okay, so we only have 2 minutes left, so you have an option of using 2 minutes now or waiting till later when you can talk longer. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Same thing for you. If
Okay, well, I'll go quickly. My name is Deborah Burns. I live on Wayne Street in Highland Park. I understand the borough has neither the deep pockets nor the connections of Mr. Morris. However, when his company applied for a permit to cut hundreds of trees on the Buckwoods property, ostensibly to facilitate soil testing, without submitting a site plan, what did the borough choose to do? Did the borough require a site plan? Did the borough immediately alert residents regarding this application? Did the borough contact the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for guidance? Did the borough employ its own licensed site remediation professional to ensure that such a radical and destructive action was necessary? No. The borough issued the permit to cut the trees. Local residents hired and paid an attorney. Local residents hired an independent LSRP who found that cutting the trees for soil testing was not in fact required for site remediation. The appellate court found this persuasive enough to issue a stay, thereby prohibiting the developer from moving forward. That appellate judge retired. Mr. Morris appealed the stay. The case was heard before a different judge who ruled that only the LSRP of Mr. Morris would be heard, which seems akin to telling a defendant's lawyer that only the prosecutor's expert witness testimony will be heard. The judge announced he would issue his ruling regarding the stay on Monday. At the end of the day, he did, lifting the stay. The heavy machinery was there already in place. Buckwoods is no more, given the fact that you so easily and thoughtlessly granted the tree removal permit. And I do not accept that some other judge forced you to do this. There's obviously something that you could have done. Why should we believe how do you propose to proceed in this next litigation where he's suing us to pay for the remediation that he's in control of, and why should we believe that you'll do a better job this time? Thank you.
Ed, could you just address the reason, the fact that we were ordered by the court, because she's contesting that?
Well, as I mentioned, there was a judge by the name of Arnold Natale who now is on the appellate court. He no longer sits over in Middlesex County. But he is the judge that picked up the old challenge that we had going back to 2009 and finally issued a court order in 2017 that directed that we issue the permit. The permit was issued in accordance with the tree removal ordinance. A site plan is not required to issue a permit under the tree removal ordinance. And everything else that was supposed to be done under that tree removal ordinance was done, according to the code enforcement official. We have a 4-page addendum to that agreement, or the permit, laying out exactly what has to be done. We weren't happy to issue that permit. We put off issuing that permit as long as we could. But I've got a copy of the court order, and I'd be happy to share it with you, where Judge Natale directed that we issue the permit.
No, I'm sorry, but we can't. You can ask that question later, but we can't go back and forth at this point. Okay. May I have a motion to approve the emergency temporary appropriations? Motion to adopt or reject?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine?
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin?
Yes.
Councilman George?
Yes.
Councilman Hale?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Cho-Han?
Yes.
May I have a motion to adopt the following consent agenda items, number 11 through 17?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine?
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin?
Yes.
Councilman George?
Yes.
Councilman Hale?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Cho-Han?
Yes.
Okay, we're back in the second portion of public discussion. So if anybody has anything they'd like to say, please step up to the microphone.
Marion Sakowitz, South Fifth Avenue. I was here at the last meeting. At the last meeting, I brought up Buck Woods, and I cannot believe that I was getting assurances from the lawyer, and I cannot believe at this moment all those trees are gone. The whole site is clear cut. And I feel the borough has not protected us, and I would like to take issue with something that the lawyer has said. Okay, the addendum, first of all, my question is why the borough agreed to that particular addendum. That addendum said that the JSM could remove any, if additional environmental testing was necessary, JSM could remove trees in violation of his environmental testing overrode any borough ordinance. My question, one question is, why would the borough have agreed to, before any testing was done, having given away any control over this process?
Borough Attorney.
Well, we did retain control over the process. There was a first permit that was issued, which allowed the 71 trees to go down the middle over top of the sewer and the water line.
Right.
And those trees were removed.
But in the addendum to that, there was also inserted that JSM could now remove any other trees it deemed necessary, and it did not have to follow any of the borough ordinances. I don't believe that that was negotiated well on behalf of the borough. Secondly,
well, we're not recalling that addendum. And
I have the addendum, I can show it to you.
Yeah, with all due respect, I don't think that's what the addendum says.
Okay, I'll come back with the addendum.
Okay.
You can try somebody else.
We'll compare our addendums.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Bill Gorduke. I live at 13 Lewis Street, and I want to bring the attention of the council to a problem that has arisen from discrepancies between the ordinances of Edison and Highland Park. The problem is a bus company operated in Edison on Coles Road because they cannot park their vehicles in Edison because they are prohibited. They park their vehicles on the Highland Park side of Coles Road next to my house every day, every night, and they are operating these vehicles in the street. It disturbs us in the morning between 5 and 7 a.m. They make noise, it wakes us up. They also idle these vehicles unoccupied for periods of up to a half hour. They obstruct traffic. They cause litter on my property.
Okay, I'm going to stop you for 1 second. Lieutenant Panicella?
They're really working on that.
Yes, but my point really at the end is I propose that Highland Park created an ordinance banning the parking of commercial buses overnight.
And that's the ordinance that you're saying Edison has?
There is no ordinance, yes. There is no ordinance in Highland Park. It's comparable. There's nothing that prevents them from doing this in Highland Park.
Okay, I'm going to ask that the police department look into that and work with us on putting something together.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
There,
yes.
I started something on that Friday.
Oh, you did?
I'm sorry, I got an email over the weekend. I already started working on it. I was there Friday on my own, and I got an email Saturday from you.
Yeah, I sent them an email. I thought
okay.
I'd come to the council meeting to also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do you agree with me that this is that the addendum says that to the extent any borough ordinance identified herein or otherwise is inconsistent with the term thereof, the conditions set forth in this addendum shall supersede same and control.
Yes, that's what it says, but if you read the rest of the agreement, It is to implement the requirements of Section 388 of the code, which is the tree removal ordinance. So, for example, there was no requirement to do a site plan because that's not something that falls in Chapter 388-4 of the code. So the intent of that language was to say that we are following, and we spelled out in this addendum what we are following in terms of the tree replacement, the posting of the bonds, et cetera, which all come out of that section of the code. So the intention was to say that the tree removal code section was the one that would govern the issuance of the permit.
Do you get that now?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure why why they were then permitted to remove all the trees on the steep slope and permitted to clear cut when both those things are in violation of our tree ordinance.
Well, because they're investigating, quote unquote, the site for contamination and pollution, so that the state law, which allows them to do that, would allow them to go where the pollution seems to be. They started in the middle, on the 55-foot strip down the middle, and if they found contamination that seemed to extend beyond that, which unfortunately they did, they could get a second permit and begin to work their way out from the core, and that's the second permit. But it was governed by what the tree removal ordinance says.
Okay, second point, this addendum gave the borough only 15 days to respond to the request for the permit. Now, the tree removal permit seems to me a process designed for somebody trying to remove a dead tree in their backyard. The tree removal process was not designed for somebody who was going to remove 179 trees and make a major change to a large tract in town. And so we were only, so he was not required to come before the planning board. He was not required to do any environmental studies. So he used this tree removal process to avoid any scrutiny by relevant commissions and professionals in town. Well, a few more things. Also, this addendum only gave the borough 2 weeks to respond. The borough does not respond quickly to things. The borough did not, 2 weeks was not enough time for the borough to absorb the magnitude of this request. 2 weeks was not enough time for them to notify the neighbors. The notification that the tree removal was going to happen was dated May 9th, and it was sent in regular mail. The tree removal started May 11th. So going forward, I would certainly urge the borough to be very careful with these timelines, that these timelines are very strict, and the borough should have notified the neighbors immediately, as soon as that tree permit request came in.
I agree with you.
Okay, so going forward, I would like to think that the borough is going to not be caught sleeping when some of these important things come in. Okay, that's because certainly the neighbors would have protested, would have tried to do more things at that time if we had known.
Yeah, and that's an important thing. I am feeling the frustration of all of the protesting being ignored by the developer and the courts.
But there's no reason he has to listen to us, and he will never listen to us unless I feel like he's got cannons, we've got a pea shooter.
Yeah.
He's got full-time people, this is all they do, and they're very adept at that.
Right, and he's got very deep pockets.
Okay, okay, so there's one other thing. Okay, well, let somebody else go, and then I'll...
You can come back up if you find it. Hi, please state your name and address.
Oh, wait, I didn't know. Okay.
It's still Marion.
Okay. Now, we did have an option at the time this request was put in to have our LSRP review it. Our LSRP, his LSRP has control over the situation. But if we had gotten our LSRP in, and we could have asked our LSRP to question some of the decisions made by his LSRP would have had to defend why they needed to take down that many trees. The fact that we never consulted our LSRP and brought our LSRP in on these discussions, I think is critical, because Jack Morris says over and over again, our LSRP concurred. Our LSRP, does anybody know if our LSRP even went down to the site? I've seen no record of anything from our LSRP. So we lost the opportunity before we issued that permit to have our LSRP weigh in. Our LSRP giving input at that point would have carried weight and possibly would have protected those trees. And one more thing. So I would like to think that going forward, the borough will make sure to handle these things better, to make sure that anything that comes through the court is handled in a professional manner, that people on the council will be following these court orders and appropriate decisions will be made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laurel Kornfeld, 106 North 6th Avenue. Is this working?
Yes, you.
Okay, yeah, and I'm also here to talk about Buck Woods. And to emphasize it's not just an issue for the neighbors, it's really an issue for the borough, it's an issue for the state, the country, the planet. And long before this 2009 battle started, many people here were involved in a 14-month battle against JSM from 1999 to 2000, and in which a development that proposed 22 or 24 houses was voted down. And I just wanted to cite some of the environmental sensitivities of this land at the time, which I would assume still apply. I'm hoping there's still some trees there. At the time, it had 500 mature trees. It was an aquifer. It is an aquifer recharge area. Has shallow depth to bedrock, steep slopes, and is possibly contains wetlands. The letter of interpretation for wetlands the investigation was done during a drought back in the summer of 1999. There may have been later ones, but depending on when it's observed, there have been features of wetlands seen there. And Morris, this particular developer, has shown contempt for the process, for the people. I mean, he has a reputation in the state for a reason, and I feel like this latest with the LSRP, we need to look for areas where has he done things that are either illegal or trying to cheat the system, like not allowing, how could the objector's LSRP not be allowed to be heard in court? Or did he cut down trees beyond what the permit permitted? Because now people are saying there's nothing left to preserve in the steep slopes. I remember him standing here and saying, well, if there's a problem with steep slopes, and again, this is like 2000, well, we'll just, wipe out the slopes and then there won't be steep slopes anymore and we won't have a problem. There's concern about flooding in these residences, and we have lost so many open space parcels. And yet we're supposed to be a green community. I mean, since, let's say, the last 10, 15 years, there's the Castle, the Seneca property, there's the Parker Assisted Living site, there's the Y site. I don't know if we have any tracts of open space left. And this area, there has been some, as far as the test pits, it's not clear that so many trees needed to be removed to conduct the test pit, dig the test pits. And in fact, the contamination may be to the point that it's too expensive to clean up, to build any development. So I guess, given we're supposed to be the first, the state's first green community, and the now a new urgency in terms of climate change. I mean, one of the worst things we can do for the environment is cut down trees, because now we don't have the absorption of the CO2, but we have more people driving and emitting CO2 if the place is built up. I mean, I guess I would urge the borough to be vigilant in looking for any possible area where he tried to cut corners or to show contempt for the process, didn't follow the rules, because those things can be used against him and can be used to fight back. And I just hope there's something still to fight back for. But, you know, like I said, I want to emphasize this is not just an issue for one block.
Right, agreed.
Good evening.
Uh-oh. I hope I didn't get you sick.
Oh, no, Sela got me sick, as always. Sela's 1-year-old. So I just, Dan Stern, Cardinal, Harper Street. A couple of questions first on the same topic. Is there now a plan for the site as far as what is proposed to go there?
No.
There's no plan? Is anything like types of residences, number of residences, anything like that?
Yeah, 75 multifamily units can be built on the property when the zoning is adopted.
Okay. So just want to offer my thoughts on the topic. I want to start by saying that, so I live on Harper Street. I don't live adjacent to the property, but I've been there when I was in high school. Property adjacent to my house where I grew up got sold, and was one house with a bunch of big, old, tall trees. And I was involved in trying to oppose that development. So, like, I know exactly what this is like because I've been there. In Highland Park, we have to weigh a bunch of different factors when we're answering the question, what kind of town do we want to be? Do we need to consider being a green town, preserving open spaces, additional residential development? There's a whole bunch of often conflicting factors that we need to consider. We can have a broader tax base, or we can prevent further residential development. We can be an open and inclusive community, something I think we all aspire to be, and I think something that Highland Park prides itself on aspiring to be. Or we can prevent additional residential development. We can try to address police bias and the underlying housing segregation, because these are not two different issues. Or we can try to prevent further residential development. But there's a conflict between those two goals. So we can continue to try to fight this particular development. I don't know how much money has been spent already trying to fight this particular development. I'm guessing it's a lot. Or we can try to preserve it as it is right now, is essentially a dirt ravine. That's what it looked like when I walked by before. Or we could try to affect what's ultimately going to be on that site. So I just want to finish with the idea that, you know, I've been there. The site that we fought when I was in high school now has 3 McMansions on it and no tall trees, where it used to have one house and lots of big old trees in a neighborhood that would be at home pretty much anywhere in Highland Park with a bunch of 100-ish-year-old houses. So I know what it's like to be on the losing side of this. But we should ask, given where we are right now, what's the most productive way forward? Can we get a seat at the table to make sure that the development meets the needs of the town? Or are we going to preserve it as what it is right now and try to fight every step of the way to keep it as it is right now for as long as possible? We can do that, and whatever resources that would consume, we'll consume them, or we can try to make sure that the development in the zoning process before it's approved meets the needs of the community in terms of the residents who live there now, in terms of people who want to move to Highland Park, but maybe can't afford to move to Highland Park right now, and also develop it in such a way that reflects the shared goals of equity and inclusiveness that I think we all share. So there's a lot of conflicting demands here. Given where it is right now, I think the way forward is to try to affect the zoning process rather than just reflexively hit the brakes and try to stop anything further from happening at that site. Because at the end of the day, it seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like something is going to go there, or it's just going to sit as a dirt ravine.
So Dan, just a little history on all of the things that you're bringing up, and there's some very good points there. I also want to take you to where we are right now. And so I guess it was, you were economic development, so How many years ago?
At least 4 years ago.
Okay, so at that point, the developer had come to us and said that he was ready to start developing. And he had a plan for, I think, 227 units?
The original plan that we sat down to discuss, in fact, Mr. Morris and I were drawing on a sheet of typing paper, drawing out a plan for, originally it was approximately 135 units, which later was proposed to be 144 units. 20% of which would be affordable, because at the time it was planned to be, and I believe it still is, planned to be a rental development, which is really the only development in affordable housing that's flying right now. And plans were drawn up. We had several large meetings here in our conference room, trying to go over the plans, and there were meetings with the neighbors. We scaled the plan down a little bit. It was focused mostly on the western side, which is adjacent to 6th. We were contributing property into the plan as well, and I very distinctly remember the mayor suddenly being cursed out, and that was
by the developer.
By the developer, and after that we proceeded, in the way we have proceeded. But those plans we were making plans for a much larger development as long as 4 years ago, trying to negotiate before anything was touched, before any permits were pulled, to keep the property the way it was, because, quite honestly, and the mayor will tell you that I was preaching 5 years ago, some private developer owns the property. You can't stop it forever. And quite honestly, there's some of you in the audience may remember, there was a tree cutting summons issued back in 2001 when I was prosecutor that we had in court here for a year, because one tree got cut down, and we issued a summons, and it lasted at least this long. But that was the plan, and as a result, in the negotiation through our affordable housing attorney over the last year, more than that actually, with the fair share housing people, after COA collapsed and the courts took over, that plan was negotiated, essentially the same plan, the same coverage projected, essentially the same location. The density was cut down from 144 units to 75 units, which is basically in half. And the ordinance that we were directed to adopt is directly out of the Fair Share Housing Ordinance, which settlement that the courts approved, which limits that to 75 units, lays out the location, and tells us to pass the ordinance.
And 20% of those 75 units would be affordable units.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gabrielle Wilders. I'm at 24 Walter Avenue. I have to start by saying I am just heartbroken and infuriated by what's happened to Love Woods. The damage has been done. A huge amount of damage has been done, and there's no changing that. What I'm concerned about is moving forward now. How do we protect the environment? How do we protect the neighbors? How can you assure us that there will be minimal further damage done to that area and to Highland Park in general? I've been here because of the redevelopment at 31 River Road, and that's basically a half-acre space that they're looking at putting 40 units on. Love Woods is, 4 acres or something like that they're looking to put 75 units on. We have the Highland Cliffs, we have Marygold, we have the other development near Cleveland. We're exploding with these units, and we don't have the infrastructure to take care of the kids that are going to be coming to go to school, the public safety needs, the emergency service needs, the road needs, the traffic needs. None of that has been addressed.
Right. Well, what I was going to say was many of the developments that you just mentioned were also builder's remedy developments that we were forced into because of the COA litigation we were involved in. Well, that's what I'm saying. The settlement that we keep talking about would put an end to it. So that's the 75 units that are in the COA settlement that we've been working with. So what the plan is over there now, and as Council President George said a few minutes ago, it started out as over 200 units, which we were able to get down to 75 units in a small piece of the land, which is part of the plan that we have to work on now, exactly where it's going to go and what we want to put there. That's going to be our next steps. So, and as I said earlier, this is not ending for us here. We're not done, meaning we're not giving up.
You're not giving up what?
We're not going to go beyond what the settlement has called for, which is that 75 units on a portion of the land, where we have to put that officially down. And what we're looking at would be more protective of the property. I can't really go into it completely, right? The redevelopment plan that we're looking, yeah. But we're not giving up, and we're not stopping.
So Buckwoods was sort of the sacrificial lamb?
No, we've been fighting it. Listen, you know, I was sitting over there too in 2000 and 1999 fighting the same battle. And we're still fighting it. We lost this case with what happened. I'm not happy about it. And that's what I mean about not giving up.
So given that this devastation has taken place, and given that you're trying to cap it at 75 units, what else? I mean, we're talking, I mean, my area, 31 River Road, is still up in the air. I have no idea what's going on there. And some of these other areas that have already been built and not sold, nobody's living in a lot of those townhomes in the Cliffs or that other place. They're already falling apart. And still, I haven't seen any increase in services anywhere, whether it's public safety, garbage collection, the pedestrian safety. Nothing has changed. I don't see those improving at all, and I just see us becoming over-capacitated with people.
Yeah. So we have to do a better job. We here have to do a better job. A better job, but a better job also at letting you know about the services that have been increased. We just hired 2 new police officers, as Councilwoman Foster Dublin mentioned. There are new. Council President George was talking about expanding the one-armed bandit garbage collection and the additional whatever those cans are called.
Right, which frees up manpower for DPW to do more road repairs.
Right. The potholes all over town are driving me insane. Not just the emails I'm getting about them. And the borough administrator is working on a program to get them filled. As I think she mentioned before, PSE&G is coming in to finish some of the roads, and that'll tag into our road repair programs. So there are those things going on, and you know, we just don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, I mean, once again, communication
continues
to be an issue. I would like information about what services are being increased, and not just getting an increase in my taxes.
Yeah,
you know, and the damage that was done to the environment, to the neighborhood, to Highland Park, there was also damage done to faith and leadership. You know, and there needs to be something concrete, something tangible in showing that you're going to try to compensate in some way for that to the people, to the environment. I don't know if you plant more trees, put up bat houses for bats, or you know, something to create an environment and compensate for the damage that's been done.
Yeah. Not that we wanted it to be done, just so you know.
Things happen that we don't want to happen. I
Right.
do understand that. I'm not well informed about the legal, the logistics about Buckwoods. I know it's very complicated. I know you were fighting as well. But given everything that's happened, we all have to take action in compensating for the damage that's been done. And I'm making an emotional plea to please show that effort. Show the citizens that you do care. Actions speak louder than words.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Hi, Melanie McDermott from South 3rd Avenue again, following on the same theme of Buckwoods. I want to say to my neighbor and townsperson who just spoke very well that as a member of Highland Park's Shade Tree Advisory Committee, we will replant every tree that man and his company took down. We have more than enough vacant spots on our streets, and we have, sadly, the money in our tree replacement fund. That is our promise to you, and we need the support of all residents to accept and care for the street trees in front of their homes going forward. So as a member of the Shade Tree Committee, I ask that through our liaison, Councilman George, that we get confirmation in the near future that, and if my math is correct, $500 for each of 179 mature trees should be $89,500 in tree replacements fund, that's in the bond, that an inspection occur tomorrow to confirm that only the trees that were indicated on the permit were taken down, and if they were not, that a fine of $1,000 for every extra or damaged tree be assessed. So that's a specific request, and I'm hoping you can report back to first staff, but ultimately to the public. Going beyond that, although those trees were removed nominally for environmental testing, or I should say perhaps because they were and not in the normal construction process, I'd like to ask our attorney, our planners, those who know the regulations, what kind of site stabilization measures is he mandated to put in place? Because there were no retaining walls. That is waiting for the next rain to wash those slopes and destabilize the remaining trees. I suspect, I don't know, but there must be something that we can require. So I'm asking planners, attorneys to look into what rights we have and to act on them. And then as far as the LSRP and the past lawsuits or proceedings that we just lost, it's tempting to say that that is water under the bridge and the big bad developer with deeper pockets than us won, and to move forward. But I'm sure we all are very, very suspicious of that man and his intentions going forward. And the looming threat of the cleanup of the property and the few remaining trees, he will hold everything hostage that he can hold hostage. So it does bear looking into, because the only hold that the public has, if only that he who pays the piper calls the tune. Our state, in its wisdom, decided that the LSRP is going to be hired and answerable to the developer. That is our state regulation. The only hold that we have is the license of that professional. And that ruling that those trees had to come down in order to even conduct environmental testing does not pass the laugh test. It does not pass the sniff test. So that man has a license. It's a professional license. It can be revoked. I'm not suggesting that we go there now, but we need to know what our rights are. And I will tell you, I called the DEP. They did the database search. I'm looking at what the first round of testing found. What they have found thus far is creosote, construction debris. These are common across our fair state. There is no smoking gun. There's no dioxin. This is just blackmail. They are not going to find anything on that site that the borough can be, taken to the dry cleaners for. So we need to know that. And if there is a claim that further testing, et cetera, we should know our facts. There is nothing that is not construction related that has been found on the site thus far. And we should ask for the report of what comes out next. And then just quickly and finally, with regard to the kind of development that goes in, would be very surprised if Jack Morris is satisfied with the 75 units. Speaking for myself, and I can only speak for myself as a citizen, I'm not afraid of the number of new residents. I think that Highland Park is a destination that can accept more residents. I think people have to have an affordable place to live. I do think the infrastructure has to be in place to do that, and that that we focus our efforts on the layout, on where development occurs and where it not occurs, and not go to the mattresses over the number of units. Go to the mattresses over the units that are affordable. But, you know,
I think
we need to get something on that property, because the way it is right now is a true environmental hazard. It's a time bomb.
And I believe the 75 units is a court-ordered number.
A maximum, a minimum?
It's a minimum? Maximum of 75 units.
So he can't push for more than 75?
No.
Interesting. What a human, what can I say? It's clearly vindictiveness, so we have to be obviously careful with such an individual.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. You know, I'm new to Buckwoods and to the whole environmental issues here.
Name and address first, please, Susan.
Oh, sorry, Susan Gutwill, 224 Valentine Street, Highland Park. So I had a question, but I think it's been answered, which was what percentage of the 75 units would be affordable? So it's 20%?
Yes.
Great. Not great. Maybe that's something, I'll say what I was suggesting. And how much money is an affordable unit? What is a rental that's called affordable?
Well, it really varies from property to property, I believe. The state sets out guidelines based on income and values and rents in the area, so they would be, any units developed under this have to comply with the state regulations. So, I don't know what the number is offhand.
Okay, so this is a fantasy, but you know, it's important to have a vision. Is there any way that we could make those 75 units more for affordable housing than for wealthy housing? No way, right? All right. I want to take up any more time.
I am Amy Corwin, 117 North 4th Avenue. I have seen many steep slopes where trees have been removed with heavy equipment. The possibility for massive erosion is severe. We have a developer who is going to push hard. He will ask for everything that's been closed to be opened in his favor. I understand, I've been an administrator myself, I understand that you guys have to stay calm. And you have to be relatively complacent about following court orders, but fight back, because this guy is going to try to take us to the cleaners. He's given every evidence up till now that he's going to try to take us to the cleaners. And I've heard of other affordable housing developments with affordable housing all over the state, all over the country, where numbers get opened, where somehow or another the units that are affordable have crummy construction and fall apart, and then the residents don't have to live there anymore. Please watch this guy real close and don't be complacent just because some judge says, well, okay, fight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paul Sowers, 242 South 6th. I just moved into this neighborhood about 3 years ago, and I was aware of the fight that happened almost 20 years ago. And our family has been in this area for over 50 years, and bit by bit, I've watched small parcels and then sometimes bigger parcels filled in, and it's still a wonderful town, but it's just disturbing that you lose things that were part of your life. And personally, the natural world and parks and those things benefit me greatly, and even things that aren't, quote, parks are valued by me and others. And I hope we can just continue to watch these things and figure out new ways to deal with these problems. I would think that maybe, I don't know what the regulations are, but how could we get some housing built in the downtown where there's empty spots? I know there's probably many reasons why that's difficult to do, but...
It is difficult, but it's our number 2 objective.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
First, number 1 is tax stabilization.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ed Prince, 703 South 5th. First of all, I want to, from my personal experience, I want to thank the members of the council, because I know that you have been involved in this and you have to deal with this on a regular basis, and you have to hear our complaints and our concerns, and yes, that's part of the reason you do what you do, but nevertheless, it can't always be fun and games, and personally, I appreciate it. I have a couple of concerns, and really more questions than anything else, so perhaps you can help me out. The plan, ideally, as I understand it, would be for the building to be as close to 6th as possible. Is that correct?
As close as possible to where the other buildings are over here.
Right. So what leverage do we have to ensure that happens?
It would be built into the ordinance that we talked about earlier.
Is there anything that would prevent Mr. Morris from saying, that's not the way I want to build, and I reject that, and therefore we'll see you in court?
That's a distinct possibility.
Can we assume it's a probability, since he took down far more trees than would be necessary to build the kind of buildings that we had earlier, just years ago, discussed, and which apparently seems to be the direction we want to go in now?
Well, yes, but he's taken them down under the guise of environmental testing.
But there's no reason to test land that you're not using.
Well, as the owner of the property, he is entitled to either clean up the entire property or cap it. And he is elected to clean up the entire property, meaning dig it out.
Right. One can reasonably assume that the reason why he took down these trees is because his desire is to use that property. Yeah, he could cap it, but if you were acting in good faith, if you wanted to work with your community, if you wanted to say, yeah, you know, we talked about this before, we can work this out, you would not have had to invest additional money up front for the bond, for all those additional trees that he took down that were not necessary to be taken down at that moment.
I would agree if we had a developer who wanted to work in good faith.
So why should I not assume that in a year or 2 or 3 or 5, after the next level of lawsuits have gone through the motions, that Mr. Morris will say, you know, I really am prepared to build closer, but the price of me doing that will be, say, 125 units. And the borough will be in virtually the identical position it is right now, which is to say, we really don't want that many. We fought against that before. But the alternative is to say, well, I want to build what I want to build. It's my land. Your ordinance is inappropriate and illegal. And we go back to it all over again. So, in other words, it just seems to me the only thing that has happened is a whole lot of trees came down. But that for practical purposes, virtually nothing has been resolved. We don't know how many units will ultimately be built. We don't know how many more lawsuits will be. We say it's 75, but there's nothing that prevents the town from negotiating that in exchange for something else, whatever that may be.
The answer is no. If we embed our ordinance for 75 multifamily units, no more, into our affordable housing plan and get that approved, and we have an excellent planning consultant who has developed with a lot of background what would be appropriate to develop on Buckwoods, I have every confidence that that ordinance would be upheld, that would stick. So we're not going to talk about anything more than 75.
I think, but the town could change its mind if it was given sufficient reason to. And my point is, it just seems to me that what's happened throughout this entire process is the town is playing checkers and he's playing chess. And it's just faster and smarter and better than we are at.
Well, he's got more money than we do. I wouldn't say that he's faster, and yes, he's faster because municipal government is slow.
Right.
But I wouldn't say that he's smarter.
So
and the 75 units are written into a court settlement.
Right, but if he
so
says that,
there's no way that the town is going to want to do more than that, no matter what he offers.
Right, but the question is if the town is now forced to go into a long period of litigation so that he can use the back, so because he challenges the ordinance, which he's certainly entitled to do, right? And the town ultimately concedes. After all, it's not appealing this ruling, right? We're not going to the Supreme Court on it. Judge issued an order and we said, okay, we accept. We're not going to invest the money that is required to go to the next step. So the question, it seems to me, is to say, where does this end? How do we know that what we want now is in fact in stone and will not change? And how can that be protected? And I don't know that you have the answer for that now, because I suspect you don't. Because I don't think it exists. Because there's still too many permutations to this plan, to this issue. But
Is there an answer to that?
request.
So could you answer?
That you consider the implications of what this decision is, and really decide what hill the Borough of Highland Park is prepared to take its stand and die. Because barring that, it will be incremental, and it will be him against us, and as history tends to teach us, we lose.
Ed, you asked a question. I want the attorney to answer.
Well, the plan is to develop an ordinance which would be a part of the affordable housing and the land use code, which would cap 75 units where we want them built. And we have an excellent planner who's done a study of other multifamilies in town, and he has developed the bulk regulations to build around that. So I'm confident that if that's the ordinance, which it will be, and there'll be no negotiating beyond that, that will be the end game for the borough. You're right, he has every right to sue us if he's not happy with it, but we get the presumption of validity on the land use ordinance, and I think it would be defended.
Hello, Marcia Goldberg, 451 South Fifth. I wish I had something constructive to say, or even a good question to ask, but I just sort of want to reiterate Ed's very good points about who we're dealing with. And for example, our attorney, I was in court on the 15th, as was our borough attorney, but it's almost as if we were in a different room, because unlike Ed, I did not walk out optimistic. I was far from optimistic. We have a developer who I've never met. He might be smarter than us. He might not be. I don't know. I hope I never meet him. But he's certainly got all the resources. He has a lawyer who is a former judge who belittled our concerns. Now, you would think somebody's moving into our neighborhood, a nice little town, Highland Park, where he grew up. He might want to become, a good neighbor. But no, his lawyer belittled our concerns, interrupted our own attorney, Stuart Lieberman, a very good attorney who made a lot of good points, which the judge unfortunately wasn't too receptive to. So I was absolutely the opposite of optimistic. So that's one point. And then he is granted his permit, his stay is lifted at 4:45, and at 5 p.m., he does the equivalent of giving the whole town a middle finger. He runs his bulldozers right through the site until he lands right behind my house, because he knows who I am and where I live, and he knocks down with the bulldozers tree after tree after tree until he's legally obliged to stop at 7 p.m., and then he's back at 8 p.m. So this is who we're dealing with. It's like, hey, welcome to the neighborhood. This is his introduction to us. So let's not pretend that because we have a nice plan from our planner that he's going to be interested in this plan. He is going to do exactly what Ed says. He's going to do everything he can to get exactly what we don't want, because just out of spite. I'm convinced of it. He's already got a terribly ugly spot here, and I don't know how any of us are going to deal with that. But my most immediate concern is what's going to happen when my house starts to collapse, or I want to put it on the market and I can't sell it for the same reason. So I hope that's the first thing that you guys are going to address for my sake, because I've already spent a lot of money on my very good attorney.
Marcia, I want to have our planner and our engineer get out to your house.
Oh, your engineer should have been out there a year ago before you okayed that LSRP report. But
Yeah, I think he was.
But yes, I'll be happy to see that. Thank you.
So my name is Donna Gustafson. I live at 443 Denison Street. So I live on the other side of town, but I did see the pictures of Buck Woods, and I want to say that I really do believe this is a town-wide tragedy. I mean, it's incredible how it looks now, and I'm very sorry for the people who live in that immediate area, but I'm really sorry that we in Highland Park couldn't stop this from happening, because I do think at this point it's like a wasteland over there. I'm not sure what can even be done. I mean, short of waiting 20 years and planting all new trees. So I'm very disappointed in the town's inability to stop such wholesale destruction, especially when we talk about ourselves as being a green space. I mean, it's one thing to not use plastic bags, but we don't even have any green space left. So I really feel that
I am not happy at all about this.
Yeah, so. I'm not happy either, so thank you.
Hi, I'm Hannah Shostak. I'm from North 6th Avenue, the other side of town. Like all of my neighbors, I'm upset. The site is a disaster area right now. I was in court on Friday as well, and Ed properly asked the judge, or the judge asked Ed actually, our lawyer, Ed Schmirer, what would be the effect of removing the stay on the negotiations, and Ed said, well, it wouldn't be good because it would make the destruction of the site the focus of town concern, and the judge removed the stay anyway. So obviously this was not an optimistic situation at all, and I think you have to be an incredibly rosy optimist to have left court on Friday being optimistic, with all due respect. Now, in terms of what you do to shore up properties on South 5th, what I would like to know from both Ed and from the municipal engineer is if you can have the money included for the retaining wall and the performance guarantee that you charge the developer when he comes with a plan.
That's a very good question.
So I would like the answer to that.
Well, when he comes in with the development plan?
Correct.
Yes, he would have to post, if he proposes retaining walls, then...
No,
Not
if we have to put the retaining walls up.
Well, we wouldn't be putting them up. He would if he had to put them up.
But in the performance guarantee, if he doesn't put them up, then we can use his money
Absolutely.
to erect them.
Yes, absolutely.
So my question is, my request is to the municipality that when the developer comes with the development application, which I assume there is not one now, that in advance you do your homework and you figure out how much it would cost to put up retaining walls, to shore up those properties, and that amount be factored into the performance guarantee and the maintenance guarantee to make sure that those properties are shored up now and that it lasts. So
we could do that as part of the completeness review of the application, yes.
So how do you go about doing that? Because I know the law and I know you can do it, but what I would like to know procedurally is how you're going to get an estimate so you're prepared when he comes in, because the damage is the damage regardless of what the development looks like. He's already done site preparation for a development that we know nothing about.
Well, we would, obviously we would have to hire an expert to, at his expense, to come up with what and where the retaining walls are needed, how big, and then what they would cost, add 20%, and that would be part of his performance and maintenance bond.
Okay, so then what I'm saying, though, is that everything is very laid back around here. We're kind of nice, we're doing a shopping bag ordinance, everything is hunky-dory. But what about taking affirmative action ahead of the curve? Because if he's going to come in with a development plan, We already know that those properties are now precariously situated over a steep slope. Are we going to wait?
So I forgot your first name.
Hannah Shostak.
Hannah. The reason I mentioned to Marcia that I want to have the planner and the engineer go out to her house and that entire area is so we can get an assessment of what needs to be done. That's the first step. And then once we have an assessment of what would need to be done to secure the property there, that's when we can find out what it would cost.
Okay, Mayor, with all due respect, though, are we just going to sit around and wait for him to come in with an application? He's already done some
No, that's not what I said. That is not what I said.
Can you clarify, please?
What I said a couple of times was I want to have our engineer and our planner go out to Marcia's house and the area back there, the other houses as well, and assess for us what needs to be done to protect that property. That's a first step.
I want to also include that South 7th need to be considered in all of this as well, because I hear a lot about the other side, but there's the other side that is affected that needs to be considered, that must be considered.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, but I understand, with all due respect, Mayor, I understand you've said this theoretically, but is this something that who
I'm not
has to
saying
make this
it. I don't
happen?
speak theoretically. Okay. I am saying that I'm having these people go out there. I'll be in the office tomorrow. We can make the phone calls to the engineer and the planner tomorrow. Terry will make sure they get out there and where they need to go, and that's the first step. I can't tell you what the next steps will be until I hear back from them what is needed.
Thank you.
Dan Stern, Cardinal, Harper Street. First a quick question, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that this settlement, the settlement related to this development and some of the other settlements that you mentioned, it goes back to the Mount Laurel ruling and housing discrimination, basically have to adhere to that ruling. Is that
correct?
An appropriate, close. So basically, the situation we have now is we have a development that is court mandated due to decades of discriminatory housing policies in Highland Park.
No.
Is that not? Isn't that what we just established? That the Mount Laurel ruling has to do with building housing that is not.
It's not just.
No.
I'm sorry.
Ed, could you explain what the Mount Laurel housing litigation settlement has to do with the 75 units there?
Sure. The Mount Laurel ruling, which goes back to 1975, recognized that all municipalities in a region have to provide an opportunity for fair housing in their community. So we didn't do it here because we have a bunch of discriminatory housing policies. We did it just as part of what it required to do by the state.
Right. So it's regionally, Highland Park, Piscataway, Edison, whatever it is, there are a history regionally in Middlesex County, in Jersey, wherever you want to draw the scale. There are, the ruling was about discriminatory housing. Am I
correct.
Wrong about that?
Throughout the state.
Throughout the state, exactly. So now, regionally throughout the state, we need to remedy that history by having, and there are mandates of you need to have X number of, or X percentage, or whatever the legal standard is, and I admittedly don't know what the standard is, but there needs to be a certain level of affordable housing regionally.
Right.
And this is some of these developments are Highland Park's contribution to that. Is that an appropriate?
That's
right.
correct.
I want to make sure I'm not blaming anybody for housing discrimination. That's a thing that exists that nobody in this room is specifically responsible for. But I mean, the thing is, there is housing discrimination throughout New Jersey. There has always been. It's it's one of the enforcement mechanisms of white supremacy, which is the original sin of the United States. And part of the predicament we're in right now is that there's this legacy of discrimination, and towns were not designed to undo that. And now we're in a situation where we have to undo that. We need to contribute to undoing that legacy of discrimination. And this is not going to be a popular thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Most of the people in this room are white. We have all benefited, not by our decision, and we would not have consented to it had we been given the opportunity. We have all benefited from discriminatory housing policies in the form of housing values that increase and more favorable loans that people of color have been systematically excluded from throughout the history of as long as it's been a thing that you could do. So now we're in the situation where we have the opportunity, court mandated, but an opportunity nonetheless, where we can contribute to undoing that legacy just a little bit. And I don't know how that's going to affect anyone's thinking here, but that I think has to be part of the calculus when we evaluate these types of developments. So I just ask that everyone keep that legacy in mind as you think about how to approach these development decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
To your question, Dan,
yes,
and your concern, I do agree with most of what you said. But what we have done on this council is a very careful consideration of not just this development, but all the development that went in place. Most towns kick the can down the road. They send it over to another town so they get all the affordables in that area. In all the developments that we have done, we have made sure that that affordables are inserted in all of those pockets. And it's, as you correctly said, that a lot of people have benefited from persons of color or minority not being in those units. But what we have done is a careful consideration of that to insert that people who don't have the financial wherewithal and who can't afford it, that we make sure there are affordable houses being built into these units.
Right. In looking at the history of the developments, I've noticed that, and I appreciate that. I think we need to continue making sure we do that. That needs to be part of the math. Thank you.
My name is Susan Edmonds, and I live at 440 Grant Avenue, which is on the north side. And I don't live near Buckwoods, but I have walked near Buckwoods, and many times, practically every day, for quite a few years. I've walked around Highland Park every day for many years, and I don't have anything new to say, except I want to add my voice to, it's a voice of pain, the pain that you have all witnessed here, the loss of these trees, which is a resource that cannot be replaced. And what I hear I hear a lot of goodwill from the council, but everything seems to be reactive. And I would like to see a strong statement of value, the valuation of this town. I mean, there are hundreds of ways I could say it, but if a mature oak tree transpires 500 gallons of water a day into the atmosphere, that adds up, and I won't go through the math or give you a chart on it, but not a 9-degree reduction in air temperature. So for all those trees being taken out, all the air conditioners in town have to go up. We need to have a plan, and it needs to be understood by everybody that we value trees, and you can't just take them down. Nobody should be able to take them down unless they're sick or they need to be managed, but they need to be, because they need to be managed properly. And I know we have an environmental commission and a shade tree commission, and they do very good work, but everything is parceled out, and there's not a wide understanding as far as I know. Anyway, I won't talk on, but I thank everybody for working on this, but it is the pain that's involved is great, and I think that we should all recognize
that. Hi, Harold Sakrowitz, 617 South 5th Avenue. All right, so I've been taking some notes about what people have been saying, and I'm going to try to actually be positive. A problem is that we feel, for the most part, that we are out of the loop. And I think that what is needed is, instead of an occasional open hearing where we say things, you you identify, and this is for all kinds of projects in town, identify a few people who can be a part of what's going on, except maybe they can't hear about litigation. But we would get, see, you guys do a lot of things. Some of us here, we don't think about plastic bags. All we think about is Buck Woods all the time. And we've been at this a lot of years, and when Morris seems to be dormant, you don't pay as much attention. And whenever you have a lapse, it is costly. And we don't have lapses. We're always trying to pay attention. That tree permit is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. We didn't get notified this time. You had promised us at the previous meeting that we would always, that you would be in touch and keep us abreast of what was going on. Okay, so we didn't hear about that tree permit. Now think about it. Okay, so you told us a little while ago that the first permit allowed them to take down trees in the bottom of the property and test. And if they found contamination, they would go out. Okay, well, they went out to the very top of the property. Okay, to me, if I found, I would do it sequentially. For me, if I found contamination down the middle of a gully, then I might go out 40 feet the next time. I don't think I would go clear up a 50-foot rise. So I think that was not well thought out. I feel that a number of things were not thought out well, because you don't have enough people working on it. I would bet that virtually nobody on the council is actually have kept abreast of all the filings and things that have gone on in this case. In fact, I would guarantee, I would even put my wife up against Ed in terms of knowing every little bit of every single filing. So if you had a group other than just one or two of you thinking about these things, you may get some better ideas as to what to say. Another example, what I'm most disappointed in is our responses to what Morris has submitted in his filings. He's saying things in there that are simply not the case, and we're letting him get away with it. Okay, as an example of that, which drove me nuts on Monday on Friday when we went to the court hearing. Time after time after time, the judge let Wolfson say, "What's the point of waiting? Those trees are coming down anyway. If we don't take them down now, after the property is capped, they will die." Now, how does he know the property is going to be capped? He did not finish the testing. So we let him get away with that. He said all sorts of things there, and we don't challenge him. He asked you, well, is this going to affect the negotiations? Okay, well, you were right. You said, well, if you do this, then the town is going to be focused on the trees. Well, if he does this, it changes the property. Okay, we're no longer talking about development in Costa Rica, we're talking about it in the Sahara Desert. So that would unquestionably alter the negotiations. So I don't think that was a really good response on your part. So I think that if we had more people that you could talk to about these things, we would come up with better responses. When Morris or Wolfson submits a filing, that's a lot of pages and a lot of stuff to go through. What do our filings look like? Not like that. Okay, and now this is a technical question. With a remediation plan, did their LSRP put in a remediation plan? I didn't see that.
Well, no, he has to do the test before he puts the remediation plan.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So he had no business in court saying when we cap it, the trees will die. That's number one. Number two, with a remediation plan, do they have to put in things like these retaining walls that we're talking about? Do they have to worry about the actual property where they're doing the remediation? Well, I mean, the remediation plan can't just be a sentence that says cap it or dig it out. Right? It's got to be more to it than that.
Well, we understand their remediation plan, and the way Mr. Mars builds residential developments is he does not cap property. He digs out any pollution and brings in fill. So if he was going to do that in an area that required a retaining wall, he'd have to put up a retaining wall to implement that plan.
But the RSP can't put that in to his the RSP has to come up with the remediation plan. The LSRP has to come up with the remediation plan, correct?
Yes, he is the person, as the judge found, is responsible for the property legally.
Right, so if he thinks retaining walls are needed, he would put it in the remediation plan?
If he felt that the only way that you could dig out, if that's the plan, near, let's say, the steep slopes or near the property line, he would have to put in a plan to stabilize that so you could do the work, yes.
Okay, so his plan would have to be sort of a detailed thing. He can't just say, dig it out, cap it.
Yes, it'd have to be detailed.
Okay. All right, so that's all. I just hope you would consider at least identifying a small group that would be kept informed right along with everybody else. And they could tell the neighbors if necessary. But the way you're doing it now, word does not get out well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hello. Hello, my name is Colin Marks, and I live on 443 Graham Street. First, I would like to thank you for the overall stamina, like overall the length of the fight and the intensity. I'd like to thank you guys for that.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the remaining natural lands in Highland Park. I know about the Valley Place Ravine, and that's protected by Green Acres, I believe. I'm curious to know if there has been any change in protection status in Highland Park for like parcels of land or changes in ownership regarding protected areas in the last 8 years.
I don't believe there has been. Borough Administrator, are you aware of any changes in protective lands?
That I'm not prepared to answer. I'm not aware of any, but that's a more detailed question than I'm prepared to answer.
Would you happen to know if the protected areas database in the United States would have that data specifically?
Well, what I would suggest we look at first would be the natural resource inventory that was done not that long ago. I want to say 2 to 3 years ago, maybe up to 5 years. Don't quote me. But we have some resources that we could look at to try to see that, and so we can look at that.
Okay, and I'm looking forward to the deer counts because I know deer populations are a hassle, and especially what they do to the gardens and like how they're being displaced from the woods. So I'm looking forward to that April 3rd drone thing. Like, thank you.
And another place to get information or to start hearing about some possible developments would be the planning board, where there might be some open spaces that might be compromised. You can feel free to attend planning board meetings.
Herb Gross, Adelaide Gardens. I have listened to many men and women come up to this microphone and speak about housing. Everyone that came up here, you are entitled to your opinion, and I respect your opinion. And I would like everyone in this room and everyone watching television to respect my comments also. I have fought and lived with the white man and the black man. I have fought with the white woman and the black woman. And I am speaking for the oppressed people right now, the veterans. Right now in Highland Park, we have veterans' homes over on 3rd Avenue, a few, not many. And I would like you gentlemen on this council that are laying the plans out for the different housing developments. How about the developments to fix housing here in Highland Park? for the veterans. I know we have housing, veterans housing out in Roosevelt Park, but there are many veterans, for physical reasons, that do not drive anymore, and they are entitled to better housing right here in Highland Park, where they have access to the grocery stores and et cetera.
Mr. Gross, thanks to the work of the Borough Council and the Reformed Church of Highland Park several years ago, Highland Park was home to one of the first veterans housing homes that was totally revamped only for veterans on 3rd Avenue and I want to say
Well, right now the housing for veterans is obsolete. You have many veterans that would love to live in Highland Park under better housing conditions. We don't have anything.
We can
just
talk
have
about
a few apartments. Don't tell me that you have housing for veterans.
Okay,
You do
Mr.
not.
Gross, I'm not going to argue with you. We do have an apartment building for veterans in Highland Park.
Not many.
Okay,
Only on 3rd
but you're right. We should always keep the veterans in
Everyone that got up here
mind.
is speaking about housing, new housing. Fine, I respect that, and I respect the council for his remarks also. But in the future, I would like to see housing for the veterans right here in Highland Park.
Okay, thank you.
Diane Ray, 68 Donaldson Street. I think what you heard tonight is not a call to arms, but a call to energy. We want to see a more energized council, a more energized public body to address these issues. I think even the guy who had the idling in front of his house, we already have an idling ordinance.
Correct.
No one mentioned that.
Well, sometimes you can't mention everything.
So we don't have to rewrite the ordinance.
Correct. But there are other issues regarding the having trucks or buses parked in Highland Park because Edison doesn't allow it.
Right.
That we don't have.
Right, because we're too nice. And we are. We've been too nice to Jack Morris. We've been too nice with...
Excuse me, I have not been too nice to Jack Morris. I personally have been cursed out and yelled at by the man in front of the Borough Council president.
So what did you do?
What did I do?
If you weren't nice. But you were nice.
What, do you mean after I offered to buy her at least 3 rounds of vodka?
Well,
we stood up, we walked out, and said, "See you in court."
I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah, and also I just want to say, you see us here being quiet because we want to be contained and polite, and civil. You don't see us when we're doing our day-to-day jobs. You don't see the borough attorney having to calm me down, or the borough administrator saying, take a deep breath. You don't see that because I don't want you to see that.
We also don't have this. We don't have the resources to go up against Jack Morris. I mean, we have a planner who's here how often?
As often as we need him to come.
A few hours a week.
Well, it depends. It depends.
An engineer who's on retainer.
Right.
So we're up against a big challenge.
Yep.
And
we are. He has, as I said, he has deep pockets.
Yeah. One other thing, I just want to say, Colin, I remember when your dad was here fighting these battles as well.
Okay, one more question. The mandate of the LSRP is to deal with remediation. Now, my question is, who is the person who's going to look at the bigger picture? Does the LSRP have to take into account things like stormwater runoff and flooding and environmental issues other than the contamination of the site? And if he doesn't, then who is and how is that person going to protect us in those circumstances on the other issues besides the contamination?
Well, as indicated, the LSRP's involvement so far has been testing.
Right.
After the testing is completed, then the next step is a remediation plan. And the remediation plan has to address all of those issues you just mentioned: stormwater runoff, environmental issues, et cetera, et cetera. He can't recommend or ask to implement a plan that doesn't address that.
Okay, but he is the ultimate authority. The question is how much can Highland Park review his suggestions if they are not amenable and are not reasonable for the residents of Highland Park?
Well, if he goes beyond the scope of his duties, he gets off the reservation, for example, and is suggesting things which we don't believe is covered by the statute, we can challenge that and decline to approve his remediation plan, and that would be the next issue in court.
I mean, if he wants to cap it, that looks like a difficult property to cap, which means there'll be a lot of runoff and flooding issues.
They don't intend, as I understand it, they don't intend to cap the property. They intend to dig out, remove any pollution, any items that are polluting the property, bring in clean fill, and start from there.
That's what you're telling me now, but we were in court. Am I not right? That he said repeatedly, all the trees are going to have to go because they're capping the property. In the filings that he has submitted to court, he says all the trees have to be cut down because he is capping the property. Is that? Yes. He said repeatedly that he is capping the property. I don't know what that means in terms of other environmental issues. And the question is, whose responsibility is it to monitor these things?
Well, we'll monitor these things when we get the remediation plan. If it's capping, it's capping. If it's going to be dig out and bring clean fill in, that's what it's going to be. And then we'll have our engineers, our LSRP, look at it. But again, from the decision that was issued on March 1st, which is a lengthy decision, I'm sure you've read it, Judge McCluskey has ruled that this LSRP is the responsible LSRP for the property. His license is on the line. He has to do it right.
Okay, as somebody else said, maybe we should be looking at his license at this point.
Well,
but anyway.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, may I have a motion to go into executive session regarding negotiations and litigation?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.